All right. I'm pleased to be joined with Colette Holt of Colette Holt and Associates. Colette Holt provides legal counsel and consulting services to governments and businesses on procurement and contracting, employment discrimination, regulatory compliance, organizational change, and much more. Colette, happy to be
Uh,
with you today. How are you doing?
well, I'm fine. Thank you so much for having me. So good afternoon to you.
And are you speaking to us now from San Antonio? Is that where you're located?
I am. I've been here for a little over 5 years. I am originally from Chicago, and have spent a fair amount of time up in your neck of the woods up there in Minnesota.
Hmm.
Uh, and I definitely miss the Midwest, but I have to be honest, I have shoveled my last snow. I'm okay with that part now. But it's an interesting change. We actually moved here from Oakland, California, so that's a big change too, uh,
Hmm.
in every way. But this, my husband's already retired, and this is a much cheaper place to live. And my mother-in-law lives here, so what are you gonna do?
Okay. All right. Well, good for you. We want to talk to you a little bit today about the future of DBE programs, disadvantaged business enterprises in Minnesota and beyond. But I wonder if first you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey and your own firm. You're one of the foremost experts in this type of in DBE programs and things of that nature. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that and your career journey and how you came to found your own firm and with this emphasis on DBE initiatives.
Sure. I actually founded my own shop in 1994. So I guess it's not an experiment anymore. And I came to this work because shortly after law school, and then I clerked for Federal Court of Appeals judge, and then I went to a large firm for a while. But then I was an assistant corporation counsel for the city of Chicago, and I got the assignment to work with the city council on developing the city of Chicago's first minority women business enterprise program ordinance. And this was in the wake of the Richmond versus Croson case from the Supreme Court from 1989. So I've been at this a while now, I guess. And we'd try to figure out what to do. Uh, Mayor Daley II, there have been two Daleys in my lifetime, had just gotten elected, and nobody was going to back up on Harold Washington's affirmative action program. But we knew that we didn't have the type of evidence that the court had suddenly decided that you needed in order to support the use of race in some type of remedial contracting program. So anyway, so I worked on that, and then I went to be what was called associate superintendent at the Chicago Park District. It was kind of a combination of chief of staff and chief operating officer. And then when I was ready to leave there, I realized that I thought that there was a niche for lawyers who wanted to specialize in this area because really nobody knew anything. And so that's how I got started. And I've been doing that ever since. We focus exclusively, really, on contracting programs, both government contracting programs and then some private sector work. Most of it's been on the government side. So you mentioned the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program for the U.S. Department of Transportation. And of course, that is a nationwide program that has been around since the 80s. And many of these other programs really stemmed from the Nixon administration. Hard as that seems to believe in the current environment, but it's true. And Nixon was promoting something he called Black capitalism, which was a reaction to Malcolm X, the Black Panthers, the Nation of Islam, and a very different picture and view of what Black empowerment would look like. So, in an effort to sort of stem that and shore up Black Republicans, they came up with Black capitalism, and out of that flowed all these programs. Including the Small Business Administration's 8A contracting program, the Office of Federal Contract Compliance, which Trump has just gutted, So it's an interesting cycle to see Republicans having originally pushed the idea of supporting minority business to now coming back to these attacks on DEI.
Yeah, and what an interesting time to be in your line of work for sure.
I'm busy.
You mentioned the new leadership in Washington and what's going on with the Trump administration, but also recent court cases that have had an impact on disadvantaged business enterprises and so on. Can you just give us a quick nutshell update on where things stand now and kind of what the impact might be on disadvantaged businesses that are, say, bidding on government contracts, highway projects here in Minnesota, or tell us a little bit about kind of where things stand now.
Sure. Well, not so good, to be frank. There have been challenges to these programs over the years, but the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise DBE program for the DOT had withstood literally decades of judicial attacks, and every single court that had looked at the program had found it to be constitutional. However, once the Supreme Court gave us the Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard and the University of North Carolina cases, I think that certainly was a push for people who are opposed to these programs to go back to federal court and try again. And so a case was filed in Kentucky by two subcontractors, Mid-America Milling and Bagshaw Trucking, against the program. And the federal district court there has issued a preliminary injunction, but the case is in an odd posture. And I really put this down to the court's lack of familiarity and understanding with the way that contracting operates. Because, first of all, these are two subcontractors. They don't bid on anything to the DOT. They provide quotes usually to multiple primes that themselves are actually bidding the work. So the judge sort of gets that wrong and talks about contracts that they're going to bid on. And the reason that this matters is because he was very concerned about whether he should be issuing a nationwide injunction. There's a whole bunch of cases right now and real splits amongst the federal courts of appeals about whether a district court judge, a trial judge, has the authority to enjoin a program nationwide. So this court, being concerned about that, took what sort of historically has been the more conservative position, which is that he should limit his injunction to the reach of the injury that was alleged by these plaintiffs. So where we end up is that the injunction only goes to contracts in which the plaintiffs are, quote unquote, interested. So we have this odd structure now where within 5 days of advertisement of a contract in which they are interested, their lawyers notify the U.S. Department of Justice's lawyers, who notify the U.S. Department of Transportation's lawyers, who then notify the recipient agency that they have to withdraw that solicitation and reissue it without any DBE contract goal. We have seen this actually happen. I don't think it's happened in Minnesota yet. Well, Minnesota was one of the states that they listed they were interested in. It turns out that there are almost 25 of them, which strains credulity. But it did happen to the Illinois DOT. They had to pull contracts and re-advertise them. The most recent one I heard about was a project funded by the Federal Aviation Administration at O'Hare. And the city of Chicago had to pull that contract back and issue it without its 30% DBE goal. So, we'll see what happens. One of the things I certainly hope is that these agencies are keeping good data about when firms are being used and when they aren't. And this goes back to the results that we saw actually in Minnesota. Back in the middle 90s, the Minnesota Department of Transportation was sued by a firm, Sherbrooke Turf, over the DBE program, same exact stuff. And the department stopped issuing contracts with goals. And we saw the participation of DBEs basically disappear. And it didn't take long. My recollection, and it's been a while now, but my recollection is that happened within the first couple of quarters of contracting. One of the things that I think we had always hoped when we started these programs was that if prime contractors became familiar with these small disadvantaged firms and saw that they could do good work, that they would use them anyway. And that happens some, but not nearly as much, I think, as we had all hoped. So, the real concern is that if the court makes this injunction apply nationwide, then it would be every single DOT contract. And that includes all of the modal administrations, which are Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration, and the Federal Aviation Administration. So originally, the plaintiffs are really highway contractor subs. It's mostly what they work on. But there's nothing about the regulations that's different. And so if they get enjoined for FHWA, they'll get enjoined for the airports and the transit agencies as well. So, we're keeping an eye on that one. Where it stands right now is that with the change in the administration, the plaintiffs and the Trump Justice Department got a 90-day stay of the judge's orders and the trial date that had been set for January 26th to see what they can work out. That
Hmm.
was February 10th. So I expect that we will hear something fairly soon. My expectation is that the Trump administration is not going to defend this program. I find that difficult to envision, given their attacks on civil rights and DEI, across the country in agencies hollowing out civil rights departments, um, excising websites of information about Black and Latino folks and women as well. And so I just can't imagine that they're going to defend it. But a coalition of minority and women contracting groups and a couple of DBE firms have filed a motion to intervene in the case under the theory that essentially they are third-party beneficiaries of the program and should have a right to be a party to the lawsuit. We'll see.
Hmm.
It's very, very late in the game for that. But it's possible that the court will let them, and then in that case, then the minority contractors essentially would be defending would be defending a congressionally mandated program.
Well, just to back up a little bit, when we're talking about DBE firms, we're talking about usually smaller firms owned by women or minorities, correct? And that they oftentimes partner on some of these highway projects that are bid on by the larger contractors, right?
Mhm. Yes,
And
TVs by definition have to be small.
mm,
That's one of the criteria for being certified as a disadvantaged business is that you have to have revenues under a certain size. And certainly in larger cities like the Twin Cities or whatever, these numbers are pretty low. So these are small firms, and
mhm,
they do partner with the larger firms to increase their capacities and opportunities. So we do see some joint ventures. You see that more on airport and transit projects than highway work. But you sometimes do see that too, especially on very large projects like um, rebuilding bridges or something like that.
sure. And how can these firms protect their interests in the current landscape? What are some of your recommendations?
Well, certainly stay abreast of what's happening. I know that for small firm owners who are just trying to keep the lights on and are everything chief cook and bottle washer, it can be difficult to stay on top of that. And I appreciate that we are a tiny firm ourselves, so I get it. But I just think that they have to try to stay educated about what's happening. Certainly become part of, if you are not already active in your local advocacy groups. The Twin Cities has for at least 35 years that I know of, had a very active chapter of the National Association of Minority Contractors. And so I'm assuming that they're still going. There are women contractor groups, so get involved as a way to stay educated and network. The other thing I would do if I were one of these firms is really take a hard, honest look at where your firm needs to improve. One of the big complaints that I hear from large primes, and I think it's true, is that small firms, of course, are always having cash flow problems. And so making sure that you are attractive to a lender is going to be very important because if a big firm has to float your payroll when they haven't been paid, that makes you a very unattractive candidate. Now, in the current scenario, because you are a disadvantaged business, they will often do that. They know they need to meet a goal and they're trying to be supportive. But if the program is gone, I started out life actually as a construction lawyer, and I'm still a construction lawyer. And there are hardly any industries I can think of that can be more cutthroat than construction. It's low bid work. Everybody's just trying to make as much money as they can. So definitely take a look at where you need help. Is it you're estimating? Are you estimating jobs incorrectly, either too high or too low? If you're too high, you won't get work. If you're too low, you'll go broke. What about your safety program? Are you in compliance there? Is your back office good? Are your invoices done correctly every month? Because nobody wants to be bothered with somebody that can't get the paperwork together. So all those kinds of things are often elements where a small business needs improvement. There are programs out there to help you. My recollection, it's been some years now since I did any work for the city of Minneapolis, but my recollection is that they had some technical assistance programs. Minnesota DOT, I know does. So go and take advantage of those. I know it's hard. I know it's on top of everything else that you're doing every day. But this is an existential threat to the future of many of these firms. So people are just going to have to do that. And then, make it known to your elected representatives that these programs are important because we've been talking about the federal DBE program, but the state of Minnesota has an MBE program too. I know the counties do. I know for sure that Hennepin County does because they've been a client off and on for a long time. I know your senators are committed. I know Senator Klobuchar is, so here's a little quick story about that, which is the Senator and I have been friends since law school because we are
Hmm.
law school classmates. So I've known Amy, since we were just kids. And so I know that she understands these issues. I've talked with her about it extensively over the years and is supportive. So you got to keep making your voices heard even in these difficult times.
Interesting. Yeah, that's great advice, and it's cool that you're friends with Senator Klobuchar. Um, one thing that I'm hearing from my sources is that we might be heading towards a situation where we have more race and gender neutral goals,
Mhm.
focuses more on small business. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think what you're hearing is absolutely right. That these programs may well end up transitioning over to be race neutral small business programs. Um, Let me say what I mean by race neutral because it's kind of a term of art in our world.
Hmm.
It means pretty much anything other than contract goals. So a supportive services program that would be open to all small firms. Those are some are race neutral program elements. Um, there's also going to just have to be more of a focus by government on cleaning up their own behavior. If I when I get a new client, the very first question I ask them is not about how well their program runs. I want to know what's their net paid turnaround time. If you tell me it's more than 60 days, I don't want to talk about your program. We got to clean up your payments first. Because why have a program if you're just going to get people in here and you're going to string them out so badly that they go bankrupt? And that has happened. For those of you who've been to my hometown of Chicago and you've been to Millennium Park with the wonderful bean, and it's all great, right? That project took out the biggest black contractor and the biggest black engineering firm in Chicago because the city was so slow about paying and trying to close these jobs out. So that's some stuff I think definitely that is race neutral. That's true for everybody that the agencies really need to focus on. So small business, I think, is really where things are going. I never want to pretend to anybody that it's an adequate substitute for a real remedial civil rights program because the vast, vast, vast majority of firms would meet the Small Business Administration's definition of small. I didn't think to do that before this conversation, but I looked at Texas a couple of days ago, and 99.8% of the firms in Texas would qualify as small.
Hmm.
So it's just, people don't realize how big the economy really is. So the problem about a small business program is it sweeps in almost everybody. There are
Hmm.
ways to design them, and I'm working with agencies to try to narrow them down somewhat so that they're more focused on individuals that have economic challenges, and firms that are small. I mean, you can have different levels of size in a program. So there are things to do. And I think that's really, where we're going to be going.
Hmm. Well, that's a great advice and a great analysis of where we're at now, I think. And I've run out of specific questions for you, Colette. You've pretty much covered everything. But is there anything else you'd like to say before I let you go?
Yeah, well, the only thing I would like to say is that the DBE programs, MBE programs are not DEI. And
Hmm.
I've been saying that for a few years now since I first heard the term DEI, and I thought, what's that? And if I didn't know, that's kind of a bad start. But these programs are remedial civil rights programs designed to address the continuing impacts of systemic identified discrimination. That's a very different lens than asking whether or not people felt included. Do they feel like they belong in an agency or in an organization? The joke I've been making to people recently, I don't know if this works, but I'll share it with you anyway, which is if you've ever seen this little picture of trying to explain what DEI programs aim to do, it's a group of children and they're looking over a fence, and one child is tall and can see over by herself, and the other kids need to stand on various size boxes in order so that everyone can see over the fence so that we all know where we're going.
Hmm.
Well, my programs are about building the fence, not helping you see over it. And so they really are economic development programs. And one of the things that I think we have not done a good enough job in our industry is really explain the economic benefits of making sure that agencies and organizations have as big a competitive pool as possible. If people are being excluded for reasons that don't really make business sense, you're not getting the best pricing. You're not getting the best people. And every community should want its citizens to grow and prosper, have solid businesses, create jobs. So these programs in no way are giveaways. They're not about how anybody feels about anything. This is about money and access to it, and how tax dollars in particular are given out, and making sure that everyone has a full and fair opportunity to compete. And that's a different idea, I think, than what people mostly mean by DEI. Although I will, and I'll leave you with this, I think the Trump administration just means anything that has anything to do with Black and brown people. That's
Hmm.
what they because otherwise, why are you? This is a particular irritant personally. Why would you drop a film about the legendary Tuskegee Airmen, which is actually my dad back there was an airman. So I take this
Hmm.
really personally, that that's
Wow.
some kind of DEI. I was like, why is it under DEI? It should be under history.
Right.
And
Right.
why would you not want people to know about that so that they could be proud of our country and the
Uh,
strides that we have made? And to me, this stuff is craziness. Um,
wow.
we're gonna see.
Congrats to your
Oh, Daddy's he's long
congrats
gone,
to your
but
yeah.
the
Yeah.
stories he told.
My father also served in World War II, and
Okay.
that generation just we deserves our gratitude. That's for sure. It looks
Yeah.
like you're involved in a World War II
Oh, the
foundation.
World, yes. So here's a plug for the World War II Foundation. And our mission is to keep those stories alive because
Mhm.
my dad's gone, presumably maybe yours is too.
Yes, he is.
Right. I mean, in a minute, there's going to be nobody left who
Mhm.
was even alive as a child to be able
Mhm.
to talk about that. So the World War II Foundation, we make movies. And they've been on PBS. And in fact, if anybody goes to my website, you can find the link. We made a movie a couple years ago about my dad. We went over to Italy, went to Ramatelli, which is where the airmen were stationed. And we've made movies about D-Day. And we just had recently one where Gary Sinise, who's very involved with us, did the narration. So they're all free. Everything we offer is completely free. So people are interested, go to www.foundation.org and you can become a member for free. Because
Mhm.
our whole mission is don't forget. what those sacrifices were, and importantly these days, how we got there.
Right, right.
Yes, you
It's
know,
very,
it's important.
very important history. Very important to remember that. Hats off to you and those others involved in the foundation for.
Thank you. I'll tell them that. It's a challenge now for not-for-profits everywhere, uh,
Yeah.
and it's
Oh,
going to get worse.
yeah.
So do come visit our site, and if you have any means to provide us any level of financial support, even if somebody sends $10, we are deeply grateful for it.
Well, I'll definitely visit your site. Thanks for the tip and the heads up on that. And thanks for your time, Colette.
Yes, thank you. It's fun to talk with you, and anytime, and check back in if you want, and then another probably a couple months for sure. We should know more about where these cases are going because we didn't have time to talk about those, but there are cases against local programs, the city of Houston, Harris County, Texas, which is Houston, state of Texas. A lot of activity in Texas.
Yeah, a lot to keep you busy, that's for sure.
Yes, that's for sure. Well, thank you so much, Brian. I enjoyed it, and
Thank
look to
you.
hear from you. And please stay in touch.
Thank you. Have a
All
good
right.
rest of your day. Take
Thank you
care.
so much. Bye bye.